And after that, obviously, the adaptive algorithm takes over.
Yeah. So
Um,
is there a benefit to increasing it once they progress to a new level? Or, for example, a child who's really gifted but might have some gaps in what they've learned before? What would you recommend?
so, Kara, if you're talking about the grade override, that's a little bit different than what I described. So, there is an option to override Prodigy's adaptive algorithm on your parent dashboard. And what that does is it essentially just keeps your students on that grade. So if you apply a grade override of grade 5, they're only going to get grade 5 questions. We don't put them up to grade 6. We don't pull them down to grade 4. That's all they get. That's kind of like you just want them to work on grade 5. So you've specified that. What I had referred to earlier on is when a child first comes into the game, we ask, what grade are you in? And they can select grade 3. And that's what's the starting point for a replacement test. So I would actually recommend not using the grade override if you want our adaptive algorithm to take over. But if you really specifically want them to work on, only grade 6 questions, then you can use that grade override.
Is there a way to redo placement quarterly versus semi-annually?
Fortunately not. It's only semi-annually. Can I ask why, what you were thinking there, Anne?
Just come
And
on.
it all,
Great. Welcome.
What I'm thinking is, so I have a child who is curriculum wise a year ahead in math, but on
Mhm.
Prodigy, so we're doing fourth grade curriculum, but yet we're placing in third grade and we continue to place it. And so I'm trying to figure out why is Prodigy at that level, but yet we're doing, fourth grade curriculum and having no problem.
I see. So sometimes if you've done most of third grade, but there might still be some skills where there are gaps, we might place kids on third grade just to be safe. That doesn't mean that they don't know any of third grade. In fact, they might know almost all of the third grade content. We just want to make sure that there are no gaps before the.
If you're finding you're getting the same problems over and over again and that your child's consistently getting them right, is there a way to kind of bounce them back or bounce them up to fourth grade and stop getting those questions?
That's where the grade override might come in, but typically they shouldn't be getting stuck and getting questions right.
Yeah, I personally found it really valuable. During the pandemic, we had a kid who we really needed to prepare for seventh grade math so he could enter his school at the right level. And I would just be consistently going in and seeing where he was scoring 60, 70% and assigning him a ton of questions in that area until he mastered that. And then we would assign him in the next set of questions. Wow. So there's someone who override and assigned assessments once we moved forward, and her child jumped 3 grades between the 2 assessments she took 6 months apart.
Wow, that's fantastic. And it also asks, do you plan to update the goals to be by fives? Can you explain what you mean by that?
So right now you have to do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It'd be great to have
Oh,
15, 25. I know that 5 doesn't seem to make a to you might not make a difference, but it does to the kids when you have a daily goal for them.
that's great feedback. Thank you for that. One other thing we were thinking is potentially ingesting some of the homeschool curriculum, like some of the ones that you're using currently, Mammoth Math, Beast Academy, First in Math, etc. Would that be useful if the curriculum was aligned with some of the textbooks that you're using?
I personally don't feel it's necessary.
Okay, that's also good feedback. Alicia gave me a thumbs up, so I'm guessing it is helpful to her.
Yeah, and it sounds like I think the challenge of her having a very gifted child that you're trying to study it is a little bit difficult. We also found that with Modulo that sometimes the questions just start to get too easy for the kids very quickly because they're learning one-on-one and they have all this at-home support, and so those assigning problems feature can be useful. And I would even take it a step further and let her assign herself her own problems. The more autonomy you can give to a child over their learning, especially if they are gifted or have learned any kind of learning differences, can be a really great way to give them more autonomy over the whole math process.
Any other questions that we didn't get to here?
I'd love to dig in a little bit more to math resistance because I know that some of you said that you had trouble just your student feeling intimidated or resistant to math. Are any of you finding that still when you're playing Prodigy? I'd just be curious to know a little bit more about how that manifests and if we can kind of help you get through that. I know we talked a little bit about boredom and how having just like assigning more difficult problems can be helpful, and having the student teach back to you. Is that something that is kind of a helpful tip? Okay. I'm hearing a lot of people saying that even having Prodigy be even like more adaptive in terms of assigning these more complex problems, or even I'm thinking some type of gifted track. If we know that a kid's going to be moving forward really fast and needs a lot of stimulation, and that could be helpful as well. Okay, so yeah, exactly. So Cara was talking about her daughter was playing while listening and she got tired of the questions and getting stuck and she couldn't move beyond the battle she was in, but she doesn't have the tools to move
Mhm.
through it. So yeah, just giving her the tools to kind of step outside of the battle. And how would you do that in the middle of a battle, to just step outside and give yourself harder questions? Is there is there a way to do that, Ro?
Sorry, is that a question for me? You can't do it in the middle of a battle in Prodigy right now. That's a good question. So what we do if kids are struggling is if they get a question wrong, we pull them back to a prerequisite and we try to figure out why. It seems like here she's getting a question, she doesn't have the tools and she's just kind of giving up. This might be where you might be able to jump in and help her out. This might be where you can use the kind of light bulb in Prodigy to potentially help, or find one of the video lessons on one of the YouTube channels that Manisha had recommended to potentially give her the tools to help her out with that.
Yeah, with our
All right, I feel like you may be one of our like power users. I suspect your child uses it a lot more than the average child on Prodigy, which is fantastic. But I think you're running into some use cases here that we don't typically hear.
I see these a lot, what Kara's expressing. I mean, our kids were so passionate about Prodigy. We had all of these kind of big tech influencers who homeschool with Modulo, and all of their kids are moving
Hmm.
forward so fast. And I just made them do everything. They really wanted to use the teacher accounts. I let them assign themselves problems. They would want to assign problems to their friends. So I let
Hmm.
them do that. And then if they saw a bug in Prodigy or something, I would make them create their own customer service request and follow up. And it was really great. And they think that they were really excited to take on that
Hmm.
role in their own learning. So I think that can be really, really great for a gifted kid like yours.
Yeah. And Carol, what you're saying there, she beat the puppet master and then is now in hard mode in Prodigy. That is a new mode that we've added to give kids more to do after they've beaten the puppet master, essentially. In addition to that, the other way that we keep it fresh is there's always different seasonal events. So for example, Pumpkin Fest is coming out very soon within Prodigy. That'll have kind of Halloween pumpkin themes. Students can get all sorts of kind of Halloween masks for their characters and unique clothing and stuff like that. So that is how we try to keep it fresh, so that there's always something new to do within Prodigy.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we had kids starting to assign, I think there are some, it can be a bit tricky when a kid is just really wanting to use it more for the math than for the battles in this case. But I think even, when our children were 5 or 6 years old, I didn't go off and say, get on your computer and assign yourself the questions, but I would sit there and walk them through it and let them do it while I was there and kind of take ownership over choosing things and stuff like that. So there's a way that you can kind of be with them while they're also being the teacher and giving them a little more power over their experience.
It sounds like your daughter's progressing really quickly through the content in the game. What grade level is she currently working on within Prodigy? Fourth to eighth. Holy moly, she is really making a lot of progress.
And she's only 6, so this is pretty
That's fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, you've got quite the learner on your hands there, Kara.
Wonderful. Anything else on your mind? And maybe some people who are having a little bit of trouble with getting their kids motivated to start math. I don't know if I really emphasize this enough, but there is a big difference between math as a concept and taking a math test at school. And a lot of kids have started to associate the idea of taking a math test as the same as understanding the beautiful world of math and having the ability to do logic and count and things like that. And I think, there's a Maria Montessori who was a big mover and shaper in education. When she started teaching, she did something really radical, which is when she would say, what's 2 plus 2? For a child to start counting that on their fingers was seen as a terrible thing for them to do. And Maria Montessori saw this as completely natural. And I think it's such a great example of how we have these kind of standardized techniques that we use to teach math that many of us don't know because we didn't learn the same techniques when we were in school. And some of the natural ways that a child might learn that could be different, especially for a child who has ADHD or maybe dyscalculia and needs something more multisensory, counting on their fingers can be such a great thing. And so the more you can kind of separate math test taking to actually learning math, the better, because these techniques are very complicated and hard to master. When I was subbing in the New York City schools, I remember I went into a second grade classroom and I just had no idea what was going on with their homework. They were learning long division, but it was just so different from the way that I learned long division that I just had no idea how to teach it. And so I just said, "Does any second grader in this room understand this?" And then I just had her go around and explain it to the other kids, student as teacher.
There's a question around how long a day would you suggest is helpful? The way that I've seen others structure their math lesson and incorporate Prodigy as well is, um, except for words and decide on pets. Yes, they can spend some time on that. But for math lessons specifically, I think 40 minutes a day would be great. I've heard of people doing like quick, like 5-minute warm up, bit of a refresher on what you learned yesterday, a kind of ability to introduce content and do a mini lesson, and then provide time for practice and assessment on Prodigy. A lot of people also use the Prodigy assignment feature as a exit ticket. So specifically assigning an assignment on what your lesson was that day allows you to see how well have they absorbed that content and have they now mastered that content. So if you have, 10 questions to that assignment, they get 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. Okay, great. They've got it. You can move on. If not, and if they're still struggling, that might suggest that you need to spend some more time on it the following day as well before you move on to the next thing within the curriculum.
And that's so dependent on your own child. I think it's really important that you look at their rhythm. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, and you can really see when they're focused, when they're enjoying, and when they start to lose their focus and start going all over the place.